and because all the distractions have been removed. And then the other side, no discipline, mentally distracted, not feeling productive and exhausted. And I would say I move between those two extremes often as I'm working from home right now, because business has definitely had an impact. And I used to spend a lot of time and actually enjoy time up in the air in an airplane and flying. So that's one thing. I think just another thing is around in some way, what's changed is that we're all on a level playing field now from working from home. So everybody is now working from home. And it'll be really interesting once offices do begin opening back up, is what happens when the percent changes to some being in the office and some still saying, you know what, no, I want to stay home now, and how that's going to evolve. So I think that's going to be really interesting. The biggest challenge is definitely creating boundaries, because the assumption is that if you're working from home, and sometimes this even before the pandemic, is that you're available all the time. And so I'm actually working on a workshop right now around the importance of setting boundaries and how do you do that. And even if like 3 times a week you set an intentional not to start till 11 a.m. because you're up till 11 p.m. with clients on the West Coast, you got to set those boundaries. So that's my 2 cents there.
Totally get it. I love the leveling the playing field piece as well. Seb, what about you? What do you feel has been changing a lot or been the most challenging as you adapt?
Well, I've been quite used to changing conditions, like because I've been traveling full time for the past 2 years, and usually I change location every 6 weeks or so. But yeah, the biggest part that has really changed over the past few months is the fact that I just don't know where I'm going to be next month. And like this has stabilized a little bit because, well, New Zealand was kind enough to extend my tourist visa until the end of September. So now I know pretty much how much I can stay. But for a while I didn't know, and I didn't even know if I could stay in the given city. When the whole lockdown started, I was in Queenstown, which is kind of still a remote location. And I wanted to get closer to a big city. So then I had to move across the country, and this was not allowed at first. So yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty around that. And plus, of course, a lot of uncertainty about the state of the world and how we're going to be able to travel after that, and the conditions and how much plane tickets are going to cost, and all those things, all those questions that were kind of up in the air. And yeah, and definitely the biggest change and the biggest challenge is being comfortable with all this discomfort, basically. So just dealing with uncertainty and being able to still work and still be productive, because even though some of the demand changed and lowered in some cases with my clients, I still have to like pay the rent and get the business going. So yeah, keeping the motivation, the drive to keep working in that uncertain and anxiety driven kind of environment is really challenging. And over the past 2 years, I've worked a lot on developing my adaptability skills. So being able to get settled and create my routine in every place I go to, and very quickly. But over the past few months, I've definitely had to work more on the resilience part. So being able to work whatever comes at me. And I'm saying that again from New Zealand, where I'm inside a very protected bubble where everything is really good and well managed. And part of the anxiety right now is imagining what it will look like when I have to go back to the crazy world out there in September or something. And then I have to be even more resilient because even more uncertainty. So yeah, uncertainty and resilience, definitely the biggest changes and challenges.
Totally. I'm sure that resonates a lot for us. I think we've all had to really adapt to be more resilient during these days. Rezi, how about you? What's been challenging? Is anything Judy or Seb has been saying really resonate with you?
Yeah, well, I guess what I wanted to say to start off with is I'm actually a newbie nomad. So I had been in a desk job in the oil and gas industry for over 7 years. And then I ended up switching careers because I really wanted to be in a position where I felt like my skills were being used to the fullest potential. And in the current role that I'm in right now with an organization called 350.org, I've been there for over 10 months, and it was now this opportunity that I had dreamed of to start exploring what it means to be a digital nomad. And I started that with Hacker Paradise in Medellin in January. And I was there for 2.5 months until, well, COVID hit, and then I had to scramble back to Trinidad. And so I guess there was just that adjustment because in Trinidad, we don't really have a lot of co-working spaces. And the ones that are there, they are in the capital, and it's a drive. Like in Trinidad, you have to drive a lot to get anywhere. So that has been a bit annoying. I've, kind of been confined anyway indoors. Things are now starting to open back up. But that said, I'm still a little bit hesitant about going out too much and socializing with other people. But other than that, I would say that I guess since COVID hit, it's been dealing with a lot of emotional breakdowns that have come up. I think just from all the stress and anxiety of everything going on around in the world, and just all this uncertainty around not knowing when you can travel again, or even to like just, not being able to see my friends after I had been abroad for a good amount of time, and yeah, just trying to keep those energy levels up, and then eventually learning, okay, I kind of need to maybe switch off of social media and all these kind of things just to keep my head above water. But that said, I'm really glad that I have the team that I have, because it's been good to see a lot of people being vulnerable about that, about, those challenges, with dealing with their emotional and stress levels during this time. And I'm glad that we're a team that prioritizes people's well-being and understanding that the work will be there, and, at first take care of yourself so that you will be able to do your best work. So yeah, I guess the challenges, again, just like mainly working space and just emotional, yeah, keeping my head above water. Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate. Go ahead, Judy.
And I just wanted to build on what Rezi was just saying about the importance of taking care of ourselves, because one thing that's changing that we might not actually realize is changing is our brains. And I'm not sure, like, I study the brain as part of my programs and things. And so just as a quick refresher for those on the call, like we have our limbic system, which is what keeps us alive, right? It is what spots threat, danger. It's our fight, flight, freeze response. And that right now is in complete overdrive, whether you realize it or not. And stress signs are coming up in ways that people don't realize. So I was talking to a friend the other day. She's like, I don't know, my hair keeps falling out. It's so weird. I'm like, honey, that's stress, right? And another friend of mine is like, I'm just not sleeping well. Stress, right? Other types of things that are happening is we are like sweating more than often. If people are sweating more than often, that's usually stress related as well. So our limbic systems are in overdrive. And then we've got our prefrontal cortex, which is where we actually make those rational decisions. And we like have a wise view. We're able to determine things. And right now that's being suppressed. And what happens is when the limbic system starts taking over, it actually weakens our immune system. So going back to the importance of taking care of ourselves, if we subconsciously let our limbic system take over, all of us will end up with weakened immune systems. And right now, I was doing a workshop the other day on stress, and 60% of the people on the call were operating at a stress level that could cause 80% of them a health breakdown in the next year. So this pandemic, some of us are moving through it more smoothly than others. It's impacting all of us, whether we realize it or not. So I think that's just one thing that's changing is our brains in ways that we don't even realize.
Absolutely. I think there's so much stuff where any given day, there's so many things happening. We're in a situation that's constantly evolving. And I feel like all of us on our toes trying to pivot and do all these things. And speaking with all of you even before the panel kicked off, something that came across the board for everyone was there's this whole notion of redefining and reimagining what it means. So in all across the board, when it comes to flexibility in particular, I think all of you have spoken a bit and have so much experience in the importance and the pros of having increased flexibility. And so taking that into account with what you are doing right now with your current clients, with your teams, with the people that you're working with, what does that sort of look like for you right now? How are you sort of seeing flexibility kind of given more importance in the workplace, and how have you kind of tried to redefine it for yourself? Rezi, can we start with you this time?
Sure, no problem. I guess I'll use one of the words Seb used earlier, which was adaptability. I think definitely during this time, flexibility is all about being able to shift course no matter what happens. For example, in my organization, well, we had just kicked off like our strategies for the next 3 years. And definitely with the pandemic, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we are doing is like organizing and mobilizations, you know, getting people on the ground to talk about climate change and you know, effect change. And now all of that has had to shift to online organizing. And then one of the wonderful developers in my group started to like integrate Zoom into our current platform so that we could, you know, shift to like more online webinars and have a calendar where people can get more information on like the kind of activities and stuff that are available and learnings as well for people to be more trained in learning to talk about climate change and these kind of things. And I think as well, it's about broadening horizons. I think definitely like in Trinidad and Tobago, before the pandemic happened, a lot of businesses locally were, you know, accustomed to focusing more on local clientele, but now they've been forced to adapt to online work if they wanted to continue making money. And I think, I mean, at least my hope is that it's broadened their horizons to start thinking outside of just Trinidad and Tobago and realize that their services could, you know, be used for people across the world, you know, and so then open up more business opportunities for them. So yeah, I guess I'll stop there.
Well, thanks, Rezi. Seb, how about you? How are you feeling about this notion of redefining things like flexibility?
For me, I would say the main difference and the main kind of evolution is the notion, like the very concept of how I invoice for my work. So I used to be very stressed about like how should I bill and like what's the unit of measurement basically, and like I had this time tracker always in the corner and trying to count how many hours I spent on things, and I was really religious about being by that. But then I realized that I completely ignored stuff like learning new skills or like thinking about the problems themselves or like creating the solution before actually developing it. And yeah, these times kind of remove the focus on the grind and just like doing stuff by time, basically bidding for time. And it's something I'm trying to educate my clients about as well, like to focus on results, basically to focus on what do you want to achieve. And if you want to achieve that, yes, we can do it. Don't ask me how I'm going to do it. That's my expertise. If I need to learn new stuff, if I need to know a part of myself that I didn't even know about, if I need to read some books and stuff, this will all be a part of it somehow. And then like it's up to you to decide if my invoice is justified and if you feel like you get your money's worth. But so far I haven't had any issue with that, and I'm really happy to again focus more on results and less on hours, which is something that I've been doing progressively over the past 2 years anyway, working remotely and stuff. But yeah, it's really been accelerating over the past few months, and it's really important because I think for a lot of people, this whole situation, like working from home, not having your manager over your shoulder and stuff like that, it has redefined a lot of these like management aspects of work. It has put more light on like working for results instead of just being there on time in the office between 9 and 5 and then doing your job however non-productive it can be. It's a whole different logic about like work, and especially creative work. Like I'm a software developer mostly, and that's what I spend most of my time on. And I find that the most important thing now is for me is to focus on results.
I think Judy, you were saying something the other day that I think was really focused on the results of things as well. But I know even an article that you wrote about the different re's for redefining, reimagining, all of these different things. What are you kind of feeling when it comes to redefining flexibility?
It's a great question. I think there's a few things at play here. I definitely think it's about the broadening horizons, as Rezzy was just talking about, and Seb around the outcomes. In addition, I think it's also choice. You have the choice to create the schedule that works best for you, and then you can let people know what that is, which means then that you can respond to emails whenever you want to or are able to, as long as you're making sure you're setting expectations for others. So if my friend Karen's a night owl and she works best from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., so be it. Let her be that way. If someone else works from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., that works for them too. So I think with this new redefining of flexibility, we also need to remove judgment of others. Because I cannot tell you how many times I hear people say, why are you working so late? You've got to go to sleep. What? I don't understand why you're up so early, right? Like we say these little micro things to people that are putting judgment on the hours that they're choosing. And so if we really are going to redefine flexibility and focus on outcomes, then we need to remove those types of comments. And I know I'm guilty of making some of those sometimes too. And what I need to remember is we need to work where our energy is, not about the time of the day. I also think that flexibility in terms of it evolving, it's going to be threefold. Well, there's probably more than three, but three I think of is like flexibility with approaches. So for example, if we're all going to continue to reduce travel, I may need to change my approach instead of going into a room with people and send people a little box of what they'll need at a workshop. I think companies are going to start doing more flexible reallocations of money because they're going to need less office space. So I think they're going to reallocate funds away from the ping pong table in the office and more to a stand-up desk in a person's home. I also think flexible locations. So offices want to reduce their footprint, right? A friend of mine who is in London, who heads up HR for a global company, they really are like, you know what? We are understanding that people want to be hyper local now. They don't want to take mass transportation. They can be just as productive, which is why I think the KettleSpace model is so brilliant, because it is where the future is, to allow that hyper local walking distance to get work done. So it's my three things of how I think it's going to evolve from now.
Can I?
Yes, go for it.
Could I add to that? So, I mean, I really love that last point that you made, Judy, about, being flexible when it comes to location and where you're working from. I mean, we see like in the Bay Area, like in Silicon Valley, like people are leaving, and working, in places further away from where their offices are located, and you're starting to see the change in rent and prices falling. But then you've also seen things like Estonia and Barbados, they are now looking at, bringing in digital nomads, creating this kind of new economy around, long-term travel and making it much more legal for us digital nomads, to work in a place for a longer period of time. And I guess I'm really hoping that more countries pick up on that and extend that offer as well, so that, employers now will start to think about, being more flexible when it comes to where their employees are working, and not, be mad if they decide to, work in Costa Rica or work in Medellin or where have you, as long as they're happy and as long as they're more focused on the results and as opposed to what times you work within, that's my dream.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I think that's pretty incredible and really insightful. And as you guys are kind of thinking about the people you work with, I know, Judy, you coach a lot of different people. You work with a lot of different clients across industries. And Sherezz, you're working with teams kind of across the board, or clients that are all over. And all of you have, I think I've said this to all of you, you all come across as very grounded in what you're doing. And I think some of you have spoken to having really great support systems in place. Some of you have spoken to having really great mentors early on in your career that you've kind of looked up to. So what would you say are some of those essential skills that people really need to be developing, regardless of if they're really new to remote work, which a lot of people are right now, to get you to where you are today? And then looking forward, like, are those also things that you feel like people now really need to be picking up or working on more intentionally to evolve as the remote workspace continues to evolve alongside the pandemic, in what we had before the pandemic versus while we're in the midst of it, and what we're looking forward to in the future after? Let's see, Seb, let's start with you this time.
So I'd say definitely the biggest thing that I've had to work on is compassion. And like not just compassion for others, like of course it's really important, especially right now. Like I completely agree with Judy. It's really important not to underestimate the level collective trauma. Sorry, I think, can you still hear me?
Yes, you can still hear you. You kind of went out in the middle of that. Seb, can you hear me?
Yeah, my earplugs are acting up. So yeah, of course everybody's going through a lot of stress, and it's like super important to take that into account. When I talk to clients, I try to check in more often with their mental state and trying to understand what's the situation for them. Like for both of them, they've had budget issues, they've had to reallocate some of their energy to other projects and stuff like that, and of course it creates stress for them. So and being remote, you don't see that, you don't meet them at the coffee machine and like figure that, like those visual cues about what's going on. So it's important to be more intentional about checking in like that, and also to be more flexible with changing demands. And okay, we have invested a lot of time in this thing, but now we need to redirect our investment to something else. Are you okay with it? And yeah, this kind of questions comes all the time. But also compassion for myself, because I think there's a lot of pressure, especially if you look at like social media and stuff like that. There's a lot of pressure going around for, during these times you have to be productive, you have to improve yourself, you have to work out, whatever. And it adds up. It just compounds the stress and the demand. It's just not sustainable. So I also try to take time for myself and to take a step back and realize that it's stressful for me too, and I have to like let go of some of the things I can control, because that just creates more stress, and figure out how to do my work to the best of my abilities, and taking into account the fact that I'm anxious too. Like over the past 3 days, I've had to struggle with my breathing, for example, something I haven't had problems with since I was a teenager, basically. I've had to take some time away and figure out what was going on and why I was anxious. And it's important to, again, care for your own mental health and everybody's. So compassion is definitely the biggest thing that I've had to work on, and I think it's a good thing, because in the normal way of working, when everybody is like hustling and just distracting themselves basically with all sorts of things, you don't get to care about that, and then everything blows up in your face when it's the least convenient. So I think caring for that on a regular basis and figuring out your limits and what you can and cannot do, and what you can control and what you cannot control, is super important.
Yeah. Judy, I see you nodding along. Does any of that resonate with you? You want to jump off of from your own experience? Like what's really essential for you?
Well, I think what Seb was just talking about too was the importance of that setting of boundaries, of compassion for yourself, empathy as well. Like compassion is one piece. It's like I care for others and I care for myself. Empathy takes it another step up and is like I stand with you. So it moves things forward, and I think the world really needs that right now. And I think it's a skill everyone, not just every leader, should be learning and focusing on. And there are exercises to get there and do that. Actually, my friend Yvonne, who's on the phone, is an expert in that area as well. I think the other things, and I've already said this once, I think one of the things we just need to learn about in general are how our brains work. Everyone has one, and we don't know the half of how it works. And once you do, it's so fascinating. And I have a great book I can recommend on that as well from a friend of mine who's a neuroscientist over in London. Noah knows it as well, and was actually part of a photo shoot for the book when it first launched in New York, called The Source. So he can send you a picture of him holding it up. And I think the other thing is really important for people to get to know are their personal values. You'd be surprised how many people don't actually know. They can very quickly say, oh, I value this, I value this. But your personal values are what drives your decisions every day. So unless we're clear on those, we may be in misalignment of where we really want to be. So I think defining those are critical. I also think improv is a huge skill we should all be learning. I am a big fan of improv, and mostly because it's focused on yes and we are now in a world that has to be focused on yes and, not yes but or no but. So improv is a skill I think everyone could learn from. And I also think in this time, we all need to be building our skills around cybersecurity. A little bit off piece, but so important, because I had an experience where I was hacked last year, and someone actually hacked into my invoice, changed the account numbers so that when I was paid, it went into another account. When I chased my client, they're like, we paid you. I'm like, you paid someone, but you didn't pay me. We figured it out. But I mean, I thought I was on lockdown. I'm pretty good with my security and stuff. And so the more digital we are, I think we all can become a little bit more educated on the cyber security piece.
Sure. I think there's always new skills to learn and so many different resources online. So some of it's just buckling down, and I think being open to being like, I have no idea where to start for this, but I'm just going to try to dive in and really teach myself. And I think having that compassion towards yourself, even to be kind to yourself, of like, okay, I need to have some patience with myself to sit down and learn it. I think it's super powerful. Rezzy, what about you? What would you say are some essential skills? I know when we were talking previously, we know each other from being in Colombia together. You talked a lot about some really great female mentors you had, kind of getting out and starting in the field. What are things that you kind of learned from them that you think are still essential now that you've applied? I know you do a lot of mentoring as well. You're a role model for a lot of other young women who are coming up in tech. What is it you feel is really essential right now for people to be working on?
Mm-hmm. I guess first I'll start with myself, where I feel like one of the things that really helped me to get to where I am today is like my limitless mindset. I've always been a person who felt like I could do anything I put my mind to. And I guess over the years, I've kind of racked up all these different titles. Like I was a musician, an artist, a producer, DJ, model, blogger, now web developer, formerly a geoscientist, all these things. I've tried a lot of things and I've had success to various degrees. And I guess it goes back to one of the things that I also learned from one of my mentors, who is the CEO of this awesome boot camp in Barcelona that I work with and I do their web development for. It's called All Women. And they teach AI and other skills to women all across the world. And it's seeing her trajectory from where she started. So just to backtrack a bit, to get to where I am today as a web developer, I attended this boot camp in Barcelona. And I partnered with her company, formerly Future Funded, that was a crowdfunding campaign to help more women get into tech and thus close the gender gap between women and men in tech. And after a while, I think the enthusiasm for that started to wane, like with participants and stuff. And so then she shifted to what she does now, which is All Women, which is this boot camp. And she's maintained this kind of vision, but, has shifted the way in which she's getting there. So, I mean, I think for me, there were some things like, wanting to travel, plus having flexibility and these kind of things, and then just learning how to shift and to pivot if need be, if something isn't working. And I think it's just maintaining that sense of flexibility around that. And I also think, I've always been the kind of person, who loves to listen to others. And, I show a lot of empathy. I think that works really well in my work in day-to-day when I provide tech support to internal staff, plus the local groups that we support. But I guess to, kind of jump on to what Seb and Judy were saying about like empathy, it should also be extended to yourself. I mean, that's something I'm still working on. And one of my former product managers in my team, Susie, like she taught me, how to learn to say no. and to set proper boundaries. It's still something I'm working on, you know, but I just really, I was glad to be able to witness her doing that and to see how, you know, she asserts herself while of course still getting things done, and of course maintaining this level of empathy and, you know, trying to manage expectations as best as she could. So
Absolutely. I think it's great that you had some good people coming up that you were able to really learn from and are still kind of part of your life now. I think all of you've also talked about, I think there's a lot of community piece, right? Where there's a lot of intimacy we're all looking for, since we have to really be social distancing and buckling down. We're not able to see our teams that maybe we were able to see in person before. So what has it looked like in terms of, you know, you guys have a lot of flexibility in what you're doing now, right? Working from home, doing your thing, but how are you kind of staying connected and finding community these days to sort of balance out both at work with the people you're working with and in your personal life to kind of continue setting those boundaries, to have that compassion and patience for yourself and for others around you? What does that sort of look like in terms of the support system that you've built around yourself these days? Judy, I'd love to hear from you. I know you're part of some really incredible communities that sound like amazing for anyone to be part of. I know it's more woman focused, but I'd love for you to speak some on that.
Sure. I just want to give a shout out to Rezi and the skill of listening, which is not a skill that's in any curriculum in any school and should be in every school and every age that we do. And there's this old thing around, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? Oh, and listening twice as much as we speak. So love that, you said that, thank you. So the community connection for me, that I have 2 community groups that I meet with regularly. And neither of mine are actually all women. I have one group called the Mingling of the Minds that I started when I was in London, which brings together other independents like me, people I used to hire when I was at Discovery and Sony Pictures. And then I really loved them and said, just by the way, we're going to be friends. And I basically have brought them into my world. And then I met a group of independents in New York. And so now I've set up what is called the International Mingling of the Minds. And we meet every 6 weeks, and 6 to 8 weeks. And we share information. We have each other as guest speakers to share something new that we're working on, to get feedback. We challenge each other. We have opened up to each other, cried with each other, been vulnerable with each other, you name it. And recently I've been getting a lot of notes because I'm sort of the connector of this group of about 14 of us. And I've been getting notes from people that have said, just so you know, behind the scenes, Ewan's my new best friend, or Phil and I got together this week and had the most amazing one-to-one. And so I feel really happy that those are happening. Those kind of connections inside and outside of the meeting. And then I also have a community with what we call our emergenetic masterminds. I use a psychometric called emergenetics. And so all of us who have gone through the advanced training for that, there's a group of 8 of us from coast to coast on those calls. We meet once a month. We're all certified in the tool, and we work on projects, we share, we develop new ideas. If you are on LinkedIn with me, you'll see that we ran something called a sanity series, and we ran 12 sessions that we put together in 2 months together as a group. So we're sort of a powerful group, but at the same time, we are emotional and open with each other, and it's pretty special. And right before it hit, we were actually all planning to meet in Denver for 2 days. So we didn't get to do that, but those are what keep me going for sure.
I love that it's such a core thing that you're able to build, and it's something that you really genuinely love doing. I think it's super needed during this time, and I love that that's continued and will continue. And I hope that you are able to all reunite once it's safe to do so in person, whether it's Denver or somewhere else. Seb, what about you? I know we've spoken a lot and know each other because of Hacker Paradise, but I know that finding that community was a really big part of you even deciding to jump into this whole, I'm going to give up my apartment, I'm going to really be traveling the world and constantly be on the move. So how does that sort of look like for you?
I definitely miss it, to be honest. Like all the things that I found in Hacker Paradise, in this like travel community, I really miss it because it's inspiration from other people who join those trips and have a similar kind of global sort of worldview. It's people who have all had to reinvent their jobs somehow. And so I've opened doors and new ways of working and new ways of exploring their passions and stuff like that. So that's definitely something I miss. And then just sharing experiences, sharing new places and new cultures with people coming from different backgrounds. It kind of compounds the discovery. It's something that's magical. You have to experience it to really understand like the value it brings. And I really miss all that. The good thing is, again, that's the big advantage of something like Hacker Paradise, is that those relationships are long term. Even though you're moving all the time, you meet those people, you make friends, and you end up meeting them again a few months later in a completely different place. And you keep in touch online, and those are real, like a new kind of friendship, kind of in between the local friendships that you have in your hometown and the Facebook friends you've never met. Those are actually traveling friends you've met, and it's the best of both worlds. So that's definitely part of my support structure now. Like I have all those friends and people that I talk to on a regular basis and share the same kind of frustration and expectations about like what the world of travel is going to look like and stuff like that. So having that is definitely important, especially as like even stuff like co-working is still hard. And you can feel like the connections are harder to form, and people are just more careful and more wary, basically, of connecting with new people. Just because of like, yeah, shaking hands is not something that you do anymore, and there's all sorts of cultural aspects to the whole pandemic that are really important and create a more distant kind of environment. And the other thing that I really, really value right now is therapy. I've been in therapy for the past 12 years, basically. I interrupted it just before I started traveling because my therapist back in Belgium told me, okay, it's good. You have all the tools. I think you're ready. Your work is not done yet, but the rest of the work you can do by yourself. And maybe 6 months in to my traveling, I realized that I still needed to work stuff out and like work on myself, basically. And I found this great online Russian but based in the US therapist, and I speak to her every week, and it's really, really useful. Like again, in this whole thing, I think the most important thing you can do is just to take the opportunity to learn about yourself, to know yourself, and yeah, it's incredibly important for me in my support structure to have this right now.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Seb. And I'm glad that you have someone to talk to. And I think whether it's people at work or people in HP or other friend groups, I think it's really important to keep connecting with people, even if we can't see them in person. So we're not feeling so isolated, because physically we already are, even though some of us are amongst our family and there are kids running around, or we have pets or anything like that. You're still, in some sense, feeling a little bit lonely. But I'm glad that you've done a really great job of still connecting with other people. Rezzy, kind of shifting it over to you, I know that you were speaking to me a lot about how your team was just even on a virtual retreat to kind of figure out what to build together in terms of goals. And you've spoken a lot about being more intentionally vulnerable and open in things that are going on in your life. And I love hearing that there's that sort of openness in place for people on your team, and that dynamic amongst the team to be able to share that kind of stuff. Can you speak a bit about the support you're getting at work right now amongst the team and what that's been looking like?
Yeah, no problem. So every week I will normally have a weekly check-in with my line manager. And yeah, there were sometimes I was still kind of scared of opening up, because of course you think you should be a professional, you should be able to get work done and, forget all this emotional business, like get the work done, but my face doesn't hide, it doesn't lie. So he could easily sense that something was wrong and was like, my organization, we had updated our policy so that we could take discretionary time off due to COVID stress related reasons. So he was like, encouraging me to take that time that I needed. And when I finally did, it really did help. So I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, Chris. And, other than that, I mean, it's been really great to see, like the kind of quality of people that we have on my team. Well, for one, we're already very diverse. We, in the organization, it's over 32 countries. So it's of course a blend of, different experiences and that sort of thing, but we're all, very down to earth people. And we very much, again, like, prioritize, well-being and that sort of thing. But yeah, like on that retreat, we kind of reevaluated our ways of working, and we're thinking about ways of being much more human with each other and not having it be only about the work, and maybe having some more being human calls. But other than that, we, if anybody's down, we would share that. Sometimes people will just send a DM to say, hey, how are you going? I hope you're doing well, and that sort of thing. Outside of work, I mean, I guess Hacker Paradise has been, that really great community for me, even after the whole Medellin experience. And I'm really glad that you all started offering like more virtual ways of connecting. So with the happy hour Fridays that we had, or like the games night. Seb, you hosted 2 wonderful rocket launch parties, after the first one it didn't take off that first time. So we had the follow-up, and I just really loved that way of like keeping in touch with people that I started to build connections with. And I mean, Seb, online, like, I've started to get to know you better, and it's been really great. I would love to see you sometime in person, hopefully soon. But yeah, Hacker Paradise has so many great people, and it's a really wonderful community, and I'm so glad to be part of that and continue to be part of that even afterwards. And then through Hacker Paradise as well, like, the fact that we use Donut Buddy. So if you aren't familiar with it, it's a Slack app that allows you to connect randomly with somebody that you probably haven't talked to before, and like spend maybe a half an hour chatting, getting to know each other better. And I even then discovered afterwards that we had it in work as well. So I've even been connecting with other people outside of my team, and really getting to know them on a more human level. So I think all of those things have helped to kind of keep my spirit up, especially during the early days of the pandemic when we weren't sure what was going to happen. So yeah, thanks to you, Hacker Paradise, for all the stuff that you've been doing to, help keep our spirits up.
Well, I'm glad that's helping with you. It's also keeping us sane as well, and we miss you guys dearly. But I do love that. I think both for Hacker Paradise, for what I've experienced in the last few months working with the team, and even with KettleSpace when I was there, I think the community aspect is so important to what we're all kind of doing and integrating into our lives now, and figuring out how do we continue to sort of build upon those foundations with our teams at work. What does that look like in the future? And I think that KettleSpace and Hacker Paradise have always been really special communities for me, because they're chock full of people who literally kick open doors for people that they don't know are there yet. So whether it's you're looking for maybe a new job, or you want to pivot into a different career, or you're looking to take a cooking class to learn how to make empanadas or find a jazz instructor, there's someone who is going to know the right person to go to, and it's going to be a really incredible sort of experience, and everyone is always very, very open to connecting. So I wanted to thank you guys all for sharing some of those experiences of where you guys are now. I wanted to take this moment to open up this platform for questions. So everybody who's here as a participant, thank you for being here. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to throw it in the chat or hit the raise hand button on your end, and I can take you off mute to ask the panelists yourselves, whether you have a general question for all 3 of them or one in particular for a certain panelist. Please feel free to send those through now. And I'm seeing that one just came through on my end, just to me. So thanks for sending that. So I have someone who's asking more about, like, they're not feeling like they're an expert on their team to be able to speak about what flexibility means and how to bring that up for their team. So Rezi, I think I'll throw this over to you first, since I know that you just spoke to how your team kind of got this in place. Was Was there any conversation that you were part of or that you saw happening that ended it up being with like, let's have a virtual retreat to kind of build these things together and kind of reset on where everybody is? Was that something that you got to be part of, or that you think that you would recommend other people also do as well if they haven't kind of gotten people together for sort of a level set to say, you know, we're in this together, let's reemphasize this, let's build upon this?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, the reason the retreat came about was because, well, every year we try to do a retreat and it's usually in person. And of course, we had to make it online this time. But I guess it also came around the time of our staff break. And it was just a kind of way to kind of, I guess, kick back up the energy and then kind of take this kind of pause while we just, you know, got back from the break to think again about our ways of working and make things better, especially right now during the current season that we're in. But I would say, you know, I would say if there's somebody on your team maybe that you trust, that you could maybe pull them aside, well, or send them a Slack or a Zoom request, a Zoom call, meeting link, and, you know, and be like, you know, hey, you know, do you think that maybe, you know, our team should start rethinking our ways of working, or start thinking about, you know, ways that we could be more flexible? You know, how do you feel? And I guess try to gauge the temperature of like where are the colleagues sit on this issue. And I guess chances are that they probably are feeling the same way, but they just aren't feeling that courage to say something. And I suppose I would start off like trying to rally people together, and then, you know, shouting it out to like your team lead or whoever, you know, the powers may be. And yeah, start to gauge the response for something like that and see if the management will be open to that.
I think that's a great start, Rezzy, and I love that. I feel like we all like promote and love the Donut app extension on Slack, but I think it's one of the best things because at least a rule within HP is that we're not supposed to really talk about work. We try to do something, and I feel like people get really competitive, even if we've always done, I think with the alumni who've been on trip, we have a community Slack, right, where everyone's randomized and gets paired up with someone who opts to be in that channel. So you can still have these virtual connections and donut coffee dates remotely, which we're all kind of doing now. But when we're on trip together, I think it's so great that people then take that competitiveness of having the funniest screenshot maybe to prove that they met to the next level of, you know, sometimes it will be like, let's go get gelato. And other times we've had people be like, we should go skydiving, or let's like surf class, just the two of us. And I think it's so powerful that in those moments of not talking about work at all, it kind of lets you reset and re-energize. But I think having that and re-emphasizing that there's that openness to come and make suggestions is so, so powerful, and what we're all moving to build together in the future. Judy, is there anything on your end that you feel like you'd give advice to someone who might feel like they're not, quote unquote, an expert in these areas, and how to kind of bring this up with a team that maybe hasn't started talking about it yet, or might want to introduce a new idea?
I think this experience has reset all of us to being beginners. So that's my advice, is there are no experts right now, because we have all been reset based on the things that we've been dealing with the last 6 months. And so the only way forward is to make recommendations, to focus on what are we trying to achieve more than the how. There are no experts in flexibility. People are making it's, and one of the best pieces of advice that I got from one of my mentors once was launch and adjust. So throw something out there. Don't wait for it to be perfect, because perfection rarely comes. So launch it out there and then adjust it as you go. And it's also sort of, you know, for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's the lean startup motto, right? Like get it out there, test, trial, and keep adjusting it. So that would be my advice, is remove the label that you are placing upon yourself of being expert or not expert, and recognize that we are all beginners in understanding what this new world of flexibility looks like.
Really. Seb, would you say the same? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that I think in terms of mindset, it seems really important to me. For a lot of traditional companies and corporations, stability and safety is part of their business model, basically. And so the way a lot of those companies have been approaching this whole crisis is, okay, how can we adapt from the old system to the new one? And what I always try to remind them is, no, it's not from one system to another. It's from one system to any other. So what you have to work on is not your, what do you need to change to adapt to this new situation, is what do you need to change on a meta level to be able to adapt to any situation. Because what we are going through now with some countries are in lockdown, some are not, this is just the beginning. I know it's very scary to consider that, but this is just the beginning. Wait until the first treatments comes to arrive and the first vaccines start to arrive, and then people are not as free to move as before. And like plenty of things are going to change, not just from the pandemic, but from all the things that it triggered, like the financial and the economic crisis that are coming and all of that. This is going to be a huge challenge. And the companies who are, and the businesses in general who are the best like position to make it out of it is just those who can adapt to anything, not just change from one situation to another, but change from the current situation to any situation. And this kind of adaptability on a structural level is definitely the most important thing you can work on right now. And I totally agree with Judy. There's no expert in that regard. Like it's all again, it's not hard skills, it's soft skills that you need to develop to be able to have this flexibility, this comfort with discomfort, to be able to know yourself, to know how to set boundaries, compassion and everything. Those are the kind of soft skills that you need to develop to be able to then again adapt to anything and embrace whatever change is coming. Because again, it's not a temporary thing. I think we just flipped into a completely new model. So
I'm just going to throw one contradictory thing out there, if that's okay. Not contradictory.
Go for it.
In what you've actually said. I think we need to start removing labels as well, like hard skills, soft skills. These are just skills. And because some of these things that are considered soft skills are actually the hardest things to learn, like shifting and changing our mindset. So I'm just a big believer of like, let's focus on what are the actual skills and remove the labels of whether it's a soft or a hard skill. And that comes from 20 years being in learning and development and helping people rid the word training, because training is not a list of things that you can pick from. We want to focus on what you need to be successful. So that's all my, that's the only piece of contradiction I would say there. And yeah.
I think there's a lot of different stuff, again, we're redefining and picking up, and definitely not an expert. I know that like a kind of metaphor that came up when talking with all of you was, it feels a lot like we're all trying to jump into the pool and learning how to swim, but we also, like, everyone's jumping in and we're all trying to teach each other how to swim at the same time as we're relearning how to swim in this really chaotic thing we find ourselves in. So I think it's totally fine to be redefining. I think there's so many things we can just be open to learning from each other, all in all. So I'm glad that there's that openness across the board, that we're all, that should be nourished within a team. Seb, I see that Noah sent through a question in the chat for you. Do you have any suggestions for team wellness programs?
Not really for team wellness. I think, no, I don't have any suggestions for team wellness programs. For me, the whole wellness thing is really individual thing. Everybody has to figure out what their issues are and what they struggle with and how they can work on those things. And there are different, like right now, what helps me personally is therapy and this amazing book that I'm rereading because it's just so amazing and so relevant right now, called Daring Greatly from Brené Brown. That I mean is just life changing right now. But again, that's for me because that speaks to me personally. And yeah, just on a meta level, just take time to figure out what you need to work on. like those kind of team coaching thing with one size fits all solutions, because again, I think it's an individual thing.
Noah, I can throw out, I definitely think it's individual. I think there are things you can do as a team. So for example, Seb, taking Brene Brown, like, who I also like bow down to, you could watch, for example, her Netflix show, Brene Brown, on Call to Courage, and then you could get a group of people to talk about that. What were their insights? What were their takeaways? You know, what did they like or you know, put into action after that? So that's one thing. There also, I think you at KettleSpace have been doing some awesome team wellness stuff, the meditations, the exercising, getting people to do that. So that is pretty cool too, because it becomes a shared experience. It also creates accountability partners, which is a big, important piece right now in the world we're living in, is having people hold you accountable to do the things that you like to do. I'm actually running a workshop next week with a friend of mine on financial wellness. And it's called Managing Emotions, Managing Money and Emotions, the COVID edition, because it's one of the pieces of wellness programs that's often missed, is that everyone's relationship to money also links back to values and the decisions that you make. So that's an element that is worth exploring. And again, that's a group workshop, but it leads to individual movements and next steps. So yeah, and I see there's a question around what I think are the implications for chief HR officers on what they should focus on in this new world of work. I think it's interesting. I think the biggest thing they can focus on is, number one, is the reallocation of funds, is where there used to be like major umbrella-like benefits for people, like a gym membership, you know, discounts, things like that. I think we need to wipe out that and start from scratch and go to more of an individual need and have like a selection of where people need the benefits versus just saying, here are the 3 big benefits. I think that's absolutely. I think, what else? Like remote tools. I think HR folks need to start looking at remote tools. And I think their biggest opportunity is the global diversity talent pool that's out there. Is if we're really going to stay more virtual and working with all of our awesome digital nomads, that we can find talent around the world. There should be no excuse anymore for not being able to have a diverse workforce, because that there's not enough people in your city or your town. No excuse anymore. No excuse not to have people on a panel, diversity from around the world. I mean, we have people here from New Zealand to New York. I mean, come on. So I think that is one of the biggest opportunities, shall we say. Yeah, so I could go on, Yvonne, but you and I can talk offline about that too.
Incredible. I think those are some really, really great ideas. Rezi, is there anything on the team wellness front that you might want to bring up? I'm not sure if there's anything you're aware of.
Yeah, so a while back ago in my organization, one of my colleagues kind of took it upon herself to organize a session with us about like anxiety, especially around this time, and kind of learning, I guess, some of the behaviors or habits we may not be aware of that are actually a manifestation of this anxiety and stress around this time. So I thought that was a very like eye-opening experience. And one of the other exercises that she did with us that I thought was really great as well was about kind of writing this kind of daily log, like kind of like a typical log of activities that we do for the day. And then after we wrote that, we then had to kind of label which ones are like energizing, that make us feel like we're getting more energy, which ones that are also like taking that energy away. And that was kind of like a way to see how we could start to like plan certain activities so that we could kind of get the most done out of the day and, you know, stay fresh and not be totally depleted. So I thought that that was another really great exercise as well. And I'm really glad that she did that with us. It was really, you know, helpful to be much more self-aware about how I am during this time. And I guess some of the things that I can do, little tweaks I can do to kind of stay, I guess, more productive, you know, and yeah, while yeah, also staying healthy and mentally fit.
Love that. Thanks, Rezzy. I think, like, again, taking care of yourself during this time is really, really important for the longevity of any team we're part of, for ourselves, so we're not constantly burning out because we are just attached to our screens and living on Zoom call to Zoom call.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for sharing. I know we're a little behind schedule in terms of breaking out, but I know we have a bit of a smaller group, so I kind of want to keep us all maybe in one room. For everyone who's on, if you haven't spoken up yet, we'd love to hear from you a bit right now. I'm going to unmute everybody. If there's something that you would like to contribute, I think all of the panelists and I would be really curious to hear if some of the stuff they've shared from their experience or things that you've resonated with, if there's anything about flexibility that you're kind of redefining differently yourselves. We'd love to hear from you during this time in the next few minutes. So I'm just going to unmute you all now. So if there's anything that you guys would like to speak to, or if there are any questions, we can continue with that. I saw Mac sent through what could be a good one as well.
And also, if everyone wants to put their video on, if you want to, that would be awesome too, just to see you all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jerry, it's good to see you again. Sounds like there might be some feedback on one of this, but okay. Well, I'm assuming that your silence means that at least part of this has resonated with you. At least I hope it has, or it's sparked some sort of idea for things you might be bringing into the teams you work on, the clients you work with, the communities you might be part of. Let's throw it back to answer this other question that Max sent through. He's asking, are there any particular attitudes, habits, or features of our work culture that you are glad to be seeing questioned right now? And how do you see this global pause as an opportunity to change our work culture for the better? Judy, I see some things noodling around in you. Do you want to try tackling that one first?
Oh, no, I was actually going to say it looks like some people need you to unmute them. Noah.
Yeah, I just unmuted Noah.
Oh, okay, awesome. So Noah, why don't you go for it?
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say, do you guys have any suggestions for different practices to help disassociate your home as a place of just comfort and rest, and then associate it in reverse as a place for productivity and working?
Seb, is there anything?
Yeah, just to answer quickly first to Mac's question about the whole changes in practice in work culture. I think one of the things, again, that this whole crisis is forcing us to do is just to rethink, like, to come back to basics, basically, to remove all the bullshit and useless meetings and too much thinking, not enough doing, kind of things that's been going on for the past few years. Like we've distracted ourselves a lot from actually building stuff, I think, and doing the work. And I see a lot of companies taking that opportunity to rethink that, and I think it's a good thing. Like, for example, one of the main objections to remote work for a lot of companies was, yes, but there's a lot of things happening in meetings and around the coffee machine and everything, and in all those daily interruptions. Yeah, but there's also a lot of wasted time and energy in all those in all these interruptions, basically, and not having them, being able to focus on what really matters, I think is a really good benefit out of this whole thing. And also it focuses more on trust and less on micromanagement, which I think empowers every one of us to really, really do like stuff that matters, and not doing stuff because we have to, or because we have to be in the office again from 9 to 5, and because we have our manager blowing on hot air in our neck, but just because we understand what the outcome needs to be and what the goal is, and we focus on that. So I think this, on a general level, is going to be a big improvement. Not all companies and not all businesses are ready for that, but those who are will really come out successful. And to answer Noah's question, I think one of the things that I always find really important is to set aside a space in your home space for work and kind of create an artificial boundary of sorts. When I was working from home before I started traveling, I always tried to have like an office space of sorts with a door, if possible. But not work from my couch, not work from the living room, but always have like a dedicated space where all my gear is. Right now, I even set up like I don't have a separate room for my office, but I have this table in the living room where I actually have a screen that kind of isolates me from the rest of the room. It's kind of a big screen, so it creates a wall of sorts. And just psychologically, it helps a lot to have this kind of separation. It doesn't, like, of course, from time to time, I still work from the couch because it's like light work or something, just answering emails and stuff. But my most productive work is definitely done from this dedicated space in my living space that I set up.
I think that's really great to separate things, not just like keeping our boundaries with our team, but also boundaries with ourselves and being able to shift in and out of whatever mode we might be in for work versus personal, not letting those lines continue to blur, which sometimes they do. And I think any given hour that can kind of change on what we need, but I think respecting that and having a designated space is so important. Rezi, would you say the same on your end? Or sorry, go ahead, Judy.
Sorry, I was just going to add one caveat to that. I was on a webinar the other day with more neuroscientists, not my friend, but others. And it was really interesting because when it comes to our brains and how they work, we think with our whole bodies. So when we sit and look in one direction all day long, it actually could narrow our perceptual and conceptual capacities. So it might be great to have one designated space. It might not be so great from a brain perspective of expanding out and looking at what else is possible. So your recommendation was you might need to move around. And so that is then creating those mixed boundaries between home, work, and life. I mean, I'm in a one-bedroom apartment in New York, and I have 3 places that I go to sit to work, and I rotate between them. I bring my computer to my kitchen table, but at night when I'm like just home and chilling and not going out, I have a puzzle that I work on, and my computer's away, not in front of me. So I don't have any great advice, Noah. Sorry. Rezi, you might.
I mean, that was a great point that you mentioned there, Judy, about, trying to still move around more and stuff. And I hope I remember that when I, answer the question. So to answer Mac's question, I guess one of the shifts that I've seen is like this need for like clocking in and clocking out at a certain time versus, valuing the results more. So I remember seeing this kind of like meme or whatever on LinkedIn where I think like a manager was talking to an HR officer, I don't know how I can really, assess like that the employer is actually staying by their workstation or whatever and getting work done, between the hours that were set. They were like, well, are they getting their deliverables done? They're like, yes. They're like, right. So focus on the results and stop focusing on this fixed time. And I think that's been very healthy, I think, for everybody. And I think that shift as well will improve everybody's way of life more. I have a friend, for example, she works in a bank. And so she would work 8 hours, sometimes even more. And then even sometimes when she's already gotten her work done for the day, she will still feel these eyes on her, that she still has to stay at her cubicle and try and do something else, even if it's just, looking at Facebook or something on her computer, just so she keeps up appearances. And I find that's wrong, and now that she works from home, now she can work whatever time that she wants. And she prefers to work like, like a night owl, kind of like what how Judy's friend does, right? So, she might work from, 9 p.m. to like 4 a.m. or however she decides to work, and she gets the work done. Even for myself included, So for example, for me, it's always been hard to like do this work-life balance thing, especially when it comes to fitness. Like every year I'm like, oh, I'm going to lose weight. This is the year I'm going to lose weight. And it's been kind of hard. Actually, that's been one of the benefits, silver linings from COVID, because usually I would try and be like, okay, should I try and get the workout before I start work or should I get it in after work? And now I've actually set up my schedule where I take time off in the middle of my usual work day to get it done. And then sometimes maybe I may not work for like 2 hours in the afternoon, but then I finish up what I have to do later at night. So I really appreciate that ability to be much more flexible about how I get my work done. And I find it makes me feel much happier and there's like less weight and less pressure on myself. And I think one of the other things too, when it also comes about like, so internally in my organization, one of the other things that we were thinking about reimagining was like our stand-ups and all these other tools. We use Geekbot at work for like stand-ups and stuff. And like, there was always, I guess, that pressure to like define what my priorities were for the day. And in a way I started to feel like that was micromanagement. But then, you know, we've started to feel like, you know, it's okay actually. Like, I mean, it wasn't really the point really of defining priorities. It was more so that people would know, hey, maybe I can help you with something if you have blockers. And it was just kind of like redefining those questions so we could start to improve the engagement again. So I was really grateful, I guess, for the retreat that we had to kind of reimagine these things. And again, to touch on what Noah said, I guess similar to what Seb said, I mean, having, I guess, like a proper office in your home space might be ideal. For me, I just have my bedroom and my desk, and I just have my workstation set up, and I try to remove as much clutter from it as possible. And I think the key, again, is to like remove a lot of distractions, you know, put that phone on do not disturb or something, you know, and just really try to keep things clear so that you can focus on work. So that's really helped me. Once I'm by my desk, I know I have to work. It's not going to be productive for me if I am on my bed or, you know, going in front of a TV or something. So yeah, I really try to set those limits for myself.
Thank you very much.
I think those are all really great points the three of you brought up. Noah, the one piece that I'd add is I find that having an action I'm doing that helps me mentally transition out of work mode. So again, to the movement piece, even Judy saying, so like getting up from my desk, but if it's that at a certain hour each day, I'm going to make sure that from what I had been doing the last like couple of months is from 12 to 3, I'm not online for work. I might be setting up a call with friends and we're all painting and doing art together. Or my like cue for myself that I'm transitioning out of work might be I'm gonna go make myself a mug of tea and I'm gonna move myself to this other part of my room. Whatever it might be, even if it's going out for a short walk, that helps me kind of transition out mentally from I'm moving from professional time to this is personal time that I now want to spend with my family. So I think there's a lot of different ways to experiment with it, but giving your body a full-on cue beyond just I'm going to turn and stand up from my workspace and then maybe immediately go on my phone, that doesn't always give yourself a clear sort of boundary. I think we have time for maybe one last question. I think, Jerry, thank you for sending this through. This is pretty good. How do you deal with the resistance to your ideas and values that the next older generation imposes? So I think, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is if there's resistance in kind of some of these ideas that you're bringing to people who might be more established or more senior to you, how do you internally deal with that, or what advice might you give to people? I think we kind of touched on a little of this earlier for it's really important to be able to have that open atmosphere to throw ideas out there, but is there stuff you want to further dig into here?
I'd love to hear from Jerry if you have a specific example around this question. Jerry, are you willing?
Jerry, can you hear us?
And there is always the imposition of resistance by the next generation. I think has to do with the warped speed that we are operating at these days. I think
Hey,
conducting
Jerry,
work
I'm sorry to interrupt.
collaboratively or
I think that there might be a delay in the connection. We're only getting a few words of what you're saying. But kind of based on what you might have been hearing in terms of the patients, in terms of being more open-minded or what you can kind of learn, was there something that kind of stuck out to you, Judy, that you might want to respond to?
No, only I think I was curious to know examples because I think a chunk, like just sort of chunking the general next older population. I've met younger people set in their ways and older people that are set in their ways. And so I wonder if it's less about generational and more about what someone individually needs in order to influence them. So some people need more information, more data, more facts, more reasons to get on board with a new idea. Some people might say, oh, that sounds interesting, and get on board right away. So I think for me, it's less about generational, even though maybe it appears that way, and more about individual and what each person needs. So I think like questions I would ask when someone resists me is I might say, well, what other information do you need? Or what other information can I share with you to see this from a different light? Or would you be open to testing this out for a month to see if it has some benefits? And then we can come back and revisit and have a conversation. So I think is resistance usually will lead me to asking a question rather than taking that resistance and ending it. And when I used to work with our sales team at Discovery, I worked with our European sales team. And one of our mantras was, when you get a no, N-O, it's because you might not know, K-N-O-W, enough to get the yes. And so that's sort of I live by. Yvonne's shaking her head. Yvonne and I worked at Discovery together. So yeah, we both have lived in that world. But I think, yeah, resistance is coming from an individual place often rather than a generational one.
Really? Sab, that looked like you agreed with that.
Yeah, to add to that, it's like, it's really important to realize that all those resistances, like all those points of resistance are anchored in beliefs. It's not just the resistance itself. And if you treat it directly, you're basically putting a Band-Aid on an infected wound. It doesn't solve anything. So asking questions is the best way to figure out what are the beliefs behind this resistance. Like, for example, some people have a general understanding, like general view that most people are lazy or most people are not creative enough or they're going to get distracted because this and that. So figuring out what those real beliefs are is really the first step to understanding how you can change those beliefs. Knowing that and taking into account the fact that changing someone's belief is really hard. It's not changing behaviors or changing emotions is relatively easy compared to beliefs because we hold beliefs really close to our identity. So sometimes we think that if we change what we believe in, we change ourselves, which is not true. We are not only what we believe in, but it's really something that's deeply ingrained in people's minds. So changing those beliefs is hard. It requires proofs, it requires facts, it requires like just alternate ways of thinking, experiments, stuff like that. But figuring out what those beliefs are is the first step. And that requires asking questions, that requires compassion, that requires understanding what the history of people are. Yes, a lot of the old generation, they're having harder time like thinking about like questioning those certainties because those certainties is what they have invested in their entire career, and it's part of who they are now. So you have to have compassion to understand what those beliefs are and that they are hard to change. But ask questions. Don't take things at face value, for sure.
And just to build on what Ryan said, you brought up a good point as well, is in addition to the beliefs, it's the emotions. So like it could be fear-based, right? So I think also exactly. If people are afraid of that, I'd love to understand, like, what is it that makes you afraid? Help me understand it, because again, like asking questions at least 3 times usually gets you more to the root of where the resistance is coming from than the initial answer you'll get. So if someone says, well, like, I'm just afraid that won't work. Okay, well, what if it did work? What would that look like if it did work, right? You just sort of like the building on, and that's another skill actually, is like the coaching skill of how do you ask great questions. And that is, again, sometimes seen as to be easier than it actually is. So, and I'll give a shout out, actually. I feel like I learned a lot from my mom on how to ask great questions. And my mom's on the call right now, I think. I don't know if she's still on. But she taught me to ask good questions. And I used to get frustrated with her. I'm like, Mom, stop asking so many questions. But actually, it served me well. I think she dropped off. You didn't get to hear the shout out.
We'll back you up on it if she doesn't believe you. Sorry, go ahead, Seb.
Yeah, one of the things and like skills and like domains that really helped me with those things, like asking the right questions, identifying the source of problems and stuff, is something called neurolinguistic programming. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but there's a lot of really interesting models in that. Like, for example, logical levels. These things are really super powerful. I know it's had some bad press and like people have different views on it, but some of the tools and techniques in there are really, really interesting. So yeah, just look it up. Neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, and logical levels are especially important for that.
Well, thank you guys so much. I definitely want to be respectful of people's times. But I wanted to thank all of you guys for being here, especially if you stuck around for the entire thing. I wanted to thank all our panelists, Judy, Seb, Rezi. Thank you so much for being here and sharing so much about your experience. Just wanted to give a quick summary of kind of what Hacker Paradise and KettleSpace are for those of you who aren't familiar with us. So for Hacker Paradise, we're this really consciously diverse global community, and we're not really united by any sort of passion or ethos, by passion and ethos rather than by the industry that we're in. And our goal is really to be this like really great remote working community in the world. And when it comes to our trips, we kind of handle three big things, from logistics, so taking care of it so you can focus on what's important to you to do your work and enjoy the adventure of being abroad. For community, it's this awesome community of people, so you never really have to go with this alone. And so that extends even after a trip. So we have 900 plus people from all over the world, Rezi and Seb being some of them. And for even on-trip or off-trip programming, whether it's professional development, social activities, things that are all cultural, we kind of wrap all of that up. So if you have any questions about that, contact me or anyone else on the team. If you have people who are struggling with remote work or adapting as a team, we give a lot of really great workshops on that. And for being here today, you can snag a discount code with Future of Work 2020 if you want to join us on a trip in the future or you need help with anything. Please, again, feel free to reach out. You'll get that code and all this info, including stuff our panelists are all up to, in an email tomorrow, just thanking you for being here. Also wanted to pass it off to my friend Mac over there. Can you tell us a bit more about KettleSpace for those who are not as familiar with it? Mac, I think you still have mute on. Are you? Hold on.
Thank you.
Yeah,
hey guys, thanks Amanda. Yeah, so just a bit more about KettleSpace. So KettleSpace is a New York City-based co-working community that turned restaurants and hospitality spaces into places to work in their off hours. So obviously we don't have physical space right now, where we're kind of gearing towards reopening when it's safe, and speaking to kind of hyper locality for workplaces. That's what we're kind of really excited about, providing like super local spaces for people to go to. But in the meantime, we have a virtual platform that we launched where members can kind of network, swap skills, access discounts. You'll get a link to join after this. Yeah, I just want to thank all you, Amanda, Rezi, Seb, and Judy. This is super informative, and looking forward to more of these in the future. I will just, one more thing, and then I'll be quiet. I'm just going to drop a survey in the chat. if you guys can take a minute, just copy and paste that in your browser and fill it out after the event, that would be super helpful. Just want to get as much feedback as possible. But thank you, Amanda. Back to you.
Matt, thanks for being here. It's always great to reconnect with the KettleSpace team. Again, thank you all for being here, and taking time out of your days. Again, we very much feel that this is a starting point for any sort of thing, but I think having these conversations and getting to hear more and humanize, right, where we're all coming from is so, so important as we continue to build the future of work together. So this is hopefully going to be a series of stuff. We'll have more people on. We'll be able to continue these discussions and kind of see and experiment together as we step forward into what the future of work really looks like. So from all of us at HP and from the KettleSpace team, we'd love to wish you guys a great rest of the day. Thanks again for being here, and we'll chat with you more soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.